Welcome, everyone. So good to see everyone. So good to see everyone today. Welcome. Okay, I'll give it another 3 seconds so that everyone is in, and then we start together. Okay, how is everyone doing today? I can see a bit of smiles, a bit of tiredness, but I can see some thumbs up as well. Pretty awesome. Okay, some people are coming from other meetings into this, so totally fine to give everyone 3 seconds just to settle in, and then we just crack on. Okay, welcome everyone. So good to see all of us. Okay, let's just start. Okay, we'll start the normal way. But from the normal, we'll go to the abnormal very shortly. Okay, so here's what we're gonna do. I want everyone to go into the chats, okay? And you're gonna tell us, we can see your name already, but if you want to type your name, that's totally fine as well. You type your location, where you're joining from today, your organization as well, okay? And the last thing, how you currently measure impact in your networks, okay? I'm gonna take that again. Your name, if you want to write that again, your organization, where you're joining from, and how you measure impacts in your network. Those are the few things we wanted to share on the chat as we get started today. Okay. There's going to be a prompt on the chat as well, just in case you're just joining in. We're going to do that for the next 2 minutes, and then that will get us cracking in today. Okay, I can see a few coming on the chat already. Welcome if you're just joining us. What we need to put on the chat right now is your name, your organization, where you're joining from, and how you measure impact in your network. I can see Julian saying we don't measure it. I love that. It's totally fine if you're not measuring anything as well, okay? All right. A few more coming in. Matthew, welcome. Thanks for joining us. Han from USA. Tristan joining us from USA as well. Where are the other people from other parts of the world? Okay, Gita is joining us from Canada. Fantastic. Netherlands, Ever, welcome. Portland, Paula, fantastic. All right, this is pretty good. Please keep sharing on the chats, your name, where you're joining us from, your organization, and the way you measure impact in your organization. Those are the few things we wanted to share right now. Okay, as we're putting all of that in there, I want to welcome Wimanaka to get us started for this festival today.
All right. Thank you so much, Fash. Interesting connecting with everyone here. And like Fash has mentioned, we'll welcome everyone to get comfortable in your spaces. We don't care how nice or how ugly your background or where you are currently is looking. We encourage everyone to just get comfortable. Turn on your cameras if you can. We encourage you to turn on your cameras if you can, but if you cannot, it's still okay, it's still fine. Get comfortable, put out anything that's going to distract you as we are about to get started. Thank you all for joining. My name is Naka, I work with Fito, and I'm all the way in Africa, here in Nigeria. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And so I'm just going to quickly run us through the reason why we're here. Can we all see my screen? Just a thumbs up if you can see my screen. Okay, great. And so this is the Fito Network Festival. We started last month in May, and the festival has been running since then up to this very moment. And everything that has a wonderful beginning always has an end. We are gradually winding down and running to the end of the festival. We will be rounding up the festival this week on the 27th. And so it's been great and interesting. We've had lots of fun, lots of places where people have had so much fun. We've had the pitch tent, where a lot of funders have met, where a lot of funding issues and topics and interesting discussions has taken place. We also have the tech corner if you're a techie type and how you want to get technology into your networks. We also had those kind of sessions running during the festival. We had very close, intimate spaces which we call the bonfire sessions, where we discussed pretty much sensitive topics. And we also have the obstacle courses for those of you who like to have fun with games and all that. We've also had those kind of sessions. And we also have, of course, the workshop zone where we get our hands dirty. And this is also a workshop zone. So I hope you're all here with your gloves, with your boots, and with your safety kits, because we are sure going to get our hands dirty with the interesting speakers we have lined up for you. And so, like I said, this is a workshop zone. And just to let us know why we're here to talk about the topic on measuring the impact of networks. And we have a whole lot of interesting speakers lined up. They are going to do justice to their own introductions, but this is just to tell you that we have Amanda and Katie from Results for Development. We have Fash, the greatest Fashoranti Daminola, a FITO facilitator here with us, Andre Ling from Cooperative Impact, and Janik from Unity Frame. And just to tell you that you could still be a part of the events coming up if you can get your tickets for the remaining event. And that is on a very sensitive topic, feminist funding. I'm going to drop that in the chat box in a bit. Also, we have the FITO WhatsApp arcade where we continue these conversations, and we encourage you to join if you can. I'm also going to drop that in the chat box almost immediately. So thank you so much as I hand us over back to Fash. But just before I do that, just to also let you know that we have our needs and offers market. If there are areas where you think you're very good at, where you have lots of resources and tools and materials you'd like to share with us, please don't hesitate to fill out our needs and offers market and drop them. And if you have your needs, things, your challenges you face in your network and you need solutions, you can also do that and drop it in our needs and offers market. And we sure will help you out. So thank you very much as I hand you over back to Vash.
All right. Thank you very much. Now we want to play a quick game before we dive in today, okay? I know that many of you probably were playing pretty much when you were much younger, but adulthood has taken all the play away. So let's play a little bit before we get started. So, because evaluation sometimes can be very chaotic, if you are in a place where it's not noisy, I would like you to please unmute. Everyone, if you're not in a noisy place, just unmute because that's the way we want to play the game. And if you can have your videos on, that will be great as well. Okay. All right. Okay. Just make sure it's not noisy where you are. Okay. Great. So I'm going to read something and I'm going to ask you to do something. Okay. So please listen to what I'm going to say so that you can know exactly what you're going to do. Now, if you have ever heard about social network analysis, clap your hands loudly. Okay, I heard a bit of sound. That's pretty good. Fantastic. If you've ever heard about outcome harvesting, I want you to tap your finger together like that. Okay, I know a couple of people cannot do that yet. I used to struggle to do that sometimes. Okay, I can see people actually doing two fingers. That means you've done a lot of that. Okay, fantastic. Great. Now, the next one. If you've ever heard about network health, I want you to put your two hands towards your ears and fly it like that. Okay, just a few people. Oh my goodness, I love this. I should take a picture of this. Okay, thank you. Now, next one. If you've ever heard about systems indicators, I want you to shake your head like this, left to right. How many people? Okay, that's how we say yes in India, by the way. All right, the last one. If you have ever heard about signals of change, I want you to just continue to clap and don't stop. Signals of change. Okay, now the voices are so low. No, I'm not sure. Are we in the right room? Okay, now, if you're ready to share, to learn, and for us to really build together today, everything that has to do with evaluation, I want you to do something unusual. Just do something unusual. Like you're ready to go, you're ready to run, you're ready to make this session happen together. Just do something unusual. I'm looking at the screen now, I'm looking for unusual things. Okay, I can see Kalim doing some very unusual stuff. Okay, I can see Christine as well. I can see Nicole. Okay, who else is doing something unusual? Okay, Lena is more. They're like, no, I want to see what's gonna happen. Guys, bring it on. Okay, thank you so much, everyone. You can be muted now. And we get started. Thank you so much. It's gonna be fun. Amanda, crack us on.
Thank you so much, Fash, and hello, everyone. Welcome to this session on measuring network impact from learning to action. My name is Amanda Folsom. I'm one of the co-facilitators of this session. And as Naka has shared, we have a great team of co-facilitators here. My colleague, Katie Bowman, collaborator Andre Ling from Collaborative Impact, Yannick Kaiser from Unity Effect, and we have Fash, who you've just met, and Naka from the FITO team. So really want to extend my gratitude to the whole team of facilitators. I am a senior program director at Results for Development. We're an international NGO supporting health systems, strengthening, as well as education and nutrition strengthening. And we have supported multiple networks, learning to action networks in health, nutrition, and education over the past 15 years. And I've been involved in that journey of network building and have grappled for many years with this question of how we assess the impact of networks. And as we have just seen, there are a number of different methods that some of us are familiar with. A lot of us who have limited to no experience with network measurement and evaluation, and some of us that are still grappling with this topic. So I think it's a very important topic for today's discussion. We have a workshop session that I think is really designed to introduce some of those core network evaluation principles, share a few practical examples of methods that are being applied for network measurement that are recognizing the complexity that is innate to networks that are learning focused and regenerative. And you'll hear more about that and what that really means as we go forward. And very importantly, this is a workshop space, so we want this to be an opportunity for all of you as participants to share the network evaluation questions and challenges that you're facing in your work today, and also draw on the feedback and collective experience of all the participants in this room and this great group of facilitators. So those are our objectives for the next hour and 15 minutes or so that we have together. And I would like to now invite my colleague, Katie, to provide a few brief framing remarks. I'll just note for purposes of our session format, we're going to be in plenary for the next 25 minutes or so for some network example sharing and Q&A, and encourage you to really share your feedback and questions through the chat throughout. And then we'll be breaking into smaller groups and doing some peer assist for collaborative problem solving around network measurement challenges. So that's really designed to be practical and interactive. So that will be the latter part of our session, and then we'll all come back together briefly to wrap up and talk about next steps. So with that, I'm going to invite my colleague Katie to get us started with some brief framing around the challenge of network measurement. Over to you, Katie.
Thank you, Amanda. Hi, everyone. My name's Katie Bowman. I work with Amanda at Results for Development. I'm based in Washington, D.C., and my background is in evaluation and adaptive learning, specifically when it comes to systems and complexity, complexity-aware methodologies, something that we'll be talking a lot about today. So we can go ahead and move forward into the next slide. And presumably you're all here because either you're involved in purpose-driven networks or have some interest in networks and the impacts that they can contribute to. But before we dive deeply into measurement and impact, I would love to first unpack what we mean by purpose-driven networks. So one definition from Noel and Kenneth describes them as structures for bringing together diverse actors who share a common interest in an issue of public concern that is beyond the capabilities of any one of them to address alone. In short, a purpose-driven network does draw on the diversity as well as these threads of common purpose to create a whole that is greater than the sum of its parts. So purpose-driven networks are not one size fits all. They can range really widely across many dimensions that you see here on the slide, including their purpose. Are they solving a specific challenge, or are they focused more on developing and growing an ecosystem? Their size and geographic focus, global, regional, national, even subnational or local community level, the types and diversity of members involved in the network, how engineered versus organic that network organization and structure is. There's a lot of different dimensions here to these purpose-driven networks. Next slide, please. Thank you. So that diversity in terms of these purpose-driven networks across all of those different dimensions is a really wonderful thing because it means they can be fit for purpose, they can be tailored to your given context and given need. However, it does pose a challenge to anyone trying to devise any sort of unifying approach for measuring the impact of these networks. So beyond the sheer diversity of purpose-driven networks, we must contend with the manner in which they are achieving impact. Purpose-driven networks play a really powerful role in connecting disparate actors and supporting shared learning and facilitating shared problem solving. And this role is catalytic, but it is often not direct. So take, for example, a network that is focused on improving access to healthcare in low and middle income countries. Members of that network might learn from other contexts. They might jointly ideate solutions and then implement those solutions within their country's health system. In that instance, or in that example, the network played a critical role in catalyzing the change, but there were many steps along the results chain from the network activity to the change in national health policy, for example. This is why when it comes to measuring the impact of purpose-driven networks, we need to focus less on that direct attribution and more on progress of the network as well as contribution to impact. So how did these networks, alongside many other forces and many other actors, contribute to impacts at a local, national, regional, or global level? When assessing these nonlinear impacts of this nature, it can be especially useful to draw on the complexity-aware methodologies we've mentioned already, and that can look to qualitative, mixed method, participatory approaches to identify those early indications of longer-term impacts. And there are many of these complexity-aware methodologies and approaches. Some of them we've already signified our knowledge of in our initial exercise led by Fash, but you might know about systems mapping, social network analysis, and causal loop diagrams and the like, maturity models, outcome mapping, most significant change, process tracing, outcome harvesting. The list just honestly goes on and on. But today we're going to zoom out a bit just beyond a specific methodology to highlight a few innovative approaches for measuring the complex impact of these purpose-driven networks. Next slide, please. So we're going to look specifically at a few different examples. We're going to start out with a regenerative approach to impact measurement for networks. So we'll hear from Jan and Kaiser from Unity Effect. We'll then look at a collaborative learning network measurement and learning framework. We'll hear from Andre Ling at Collaborative Impact. They partnered with us at Results for Development in developing this framework. And finally, we'll hear from Fash, who you already heard from earlier, around measuring community level impact of collaborative learning. So I'm going to add a couple of these questions to the chat, but as we go through some of these examples, please feel free to add some of your questions into the chat box and to note if you have a network measurement challenge that you would like to share. We will have the opportunity for some of that joint problem solving and to share some of both our measurement challenges and measurement solutions that we've been working with in our breakout groups. So we can start those conversations now and take advantage of this wonderful mini network that we're creating today to learn from one another about impact measurement. So with that, I am going to pass it over to dive into our first example.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the framing and also the activation that happened, the entire future team, and also all of you who are already quite active in the chat. And what we are looking into now is how a regenerative approach to measurement evaluation can look like in the context of networks. And one of the fundamental principles of regeneration is place. And also this idea that we start with us, we start in the here and now, and we want to approach it also holistically. So this is why, after hearing some of those terms already, and you might be thinking about your work, I actually invite us to take a very, very quick pause, maybe not necessarily a pause, but a moment of reflection. So inviting all of us to take a couple of deep breaths in jointly, and of course also out, not only in and out. And just really get in tune with yourself, get in tune with your body, and just noticing what's all there right now. Not only your breath, but maybe also noticing where are your thoughts going after hearing about those different terms and concepts already. Are you already thinking about whatever it is? Just notice that. And also, of course, noticing if there might be any tension, just naturally your body wants to move, stretch. So one more breath in. And you continue breathing, inviting you to notice also your environment where you are currently. Physical environment. You may want to look across above your screen, next to your screen. Just notice what's around you. And also welcome that into our joint session. Because what I then, as you do that, like us to do is to, or what I like to offer, let's put it that way, is to look at impact measurement for networks through the lens of a garden or an ecosystem. Because I think quite often when it comes about that, it gets about impact, it gets about methods, it gets about terms, and so on. However, what I really like us to do is just to conceptualize, to perceive your work, your network that you are engaged in as a living, thriving, alive ecosystem. So connecting with yourself, your surrounding, and then with the work that you do, the networks that you're part of. And what I invite you into is to take 2 minutes now to take a pen and paper if you have available. Otherwise, you might also use your keyboard. And really just start sketching out, how does your work look like if it is being approached or perceived as an ecosystem? What might be the trees? What's the soil like? What's the fungi and the mycelium like beneath the surface? And we give it 2 minutes for you to tune in. I'll play some music. I'll show an image of a garden, and then we will dive into regenerative measurement and evaluation. So this was really just to get us started. It's time to continue that. So inviting you to bring your scribbles, whatever it is, to an end. And it would be wonderful if you can actually show whatever you have done. Maybe you have to unblur your background. Just quickly hold it into your camera if you have that available. So you can see some scribbles, some blurry ones, less blurry. 2 minutes. I'm really impressed. Wow. So maybe there are some creatives, some painters out there. You can definitely notice. Thank you. Thank you so much. What I'm going to do now is to just walk you through very quickly, and in the meantime, inviting all of you to continue sharing in the chat whatever comes up for you, any resources, thoughts, and ideas. I already seen June Holly being mentioned, so yes, big shout out to June. So what I would like to introduce very briefly is a regenerative approach to impact measurement and how that applies to networks. Starting with the origins of the term impact, because for me, it's really important to understand where certain terms come from. Does any one of you know who this guy is? Or I give just 3 more seconds. Who is this guy? 3, 2, Fuller. No, not Buckminster Fuller, if you mean him. Jung, also no. The classes, though, they could be Nietzsche. Close, no. This guy is Robert Koch, a German dude, as you can see, an old German man. And what he did was actually to seeking to understand the filtration, the water system in the city of Hamburg and the effects it has on the cholera epidemic. And he was able to do controlled trials and understand how things link up and therefore able to control the disease. It saved thousands of lives. And this is one of the earliest cases of recorded impact evaluation. So yes, it was really supportive. It came also from a Western white man, and it was about controlling disease. He did not necessarily invent the term impact, but this is one of the origin stories. We've already heard, however, that working with networks, we have to understand a catalytic and indirect contribution. And I really, really invite us to reconsider, rethink this whole notion of impact and how this might actually work, not from this paradigm of control, which has its value, but really from a different paradigm. And this is the regenerative paradigm I invite us into when we look at networks that impact. There are 2 guiding principles for this. One is holism. So we consider the inner, the outer, the less visible, and the more tangible and visible. And the other principle is obviously regeneration, which means one way of saying that is evaluation. Measurement gives more energy than it takes, already in the process of applying it. And this is something that we are doing. So putting those 2 principles into action, into practice. So this is just again the overview. So from this paradigm of control, reporting to funders, to donors, whatever it is, to a paradigm of interdependence. And the garden, well, that's a framework that I brought. I will share in the chat. So we've developed a theory of change that actually works with this garden metaphor, that still works with this whole idea of methods, of approaches, of indicators, but it really puts the emphasis on the resources, on the fertile ground based on which change emerges and happens. So we are creating the conditions for change, especially longer-term change, to happen. And I'll share in the chat resource with some downloads as well that you can just go use and apply. And with this, I will hand it over to Andre.
Great. Thanks so much, Yannick, for that. Okay, so first of all, yeah, really good to be here and to see such a wonderful turnout and so much, so many interesting ideas and so much engagement already. So my name is Andre and I work with Collaborative Impact. I'm based in India and have been working in the field of monitoring evaluation for now almost 20 years, particularly in the space of complex systems change processes. And as Amanda and Katie mentioned earlier, Collaborative Impact worked with R4D recently to develop a measurement and learning framework for R4D's collaborative learning network. So I'm going to give a very quick walkthrough of some of the things that we have developed as part of that. So maybe a starting point, I mean, you know, we recognize that we need to begin from the point of users and thinking about who are the people involved who are the people who are in need of evidence, who are trying to use that evidence to support their work. And that could be a range of different actors. At the global level, for example, people managing portfolios of networks. It could be global policymakers and donors. In this case, R4D manage a portfolio or support a portfolio of collaborative learning networks in different parts of the world. And then, of course, there's the network itself, the network managers, the technical facilitators, partners, network-specific donors, the members themselves. And many of the networks that are supported are multi-country networks. And so the country is another important level itself. Within each country, members are trying to orchestrate activities in order to bring about change in their particular context. And so here we've got in-country network members, in-country lead groups, technical assistance research partners, technical facilitation partners. So how do we build a framework that is going to generate evidence that supports learning and also communication of impact for all these different stakeholders, recognizing their different needs? So we put the users in the center and then design around them. Okay. So this introduces one part of different levels, but within that, the framework, the measurement and learning framework, had 4 main components. And one of those is a portfolio theory of change. Now, we heard from Katie earlier that sheer diversity of networks in terms of composition, scale, typology, and so on, makes it quite challenging to have a consistent language for talking about these networks. But putting together a kind of overarching theory of change provides some language for doing that, some shared language, some shared ideas about the change pathways. And so the portfolio theory of change is a tool that enables that kind of understanding, and it has 2 major spheres. Rather than talking about sphere of control or sphere of influence, we talked about one sphere, which is around collaborative learning network performance. This is really the inside, focusing on the network itself, its functioning, and what it's able to achieve. And the other is contribution to impact, which is looking at how what the network does then feeds into systems change and ultimately systems impact and systems transformation. We also recognized, and one thing I want to say, actually, just building on what Yannick was sharing, it's not just a linear theory of change, but it's underpinned by a big feedback loop where everything that happens, changes achieved further along that pathway towards system change are feeding back into and enriching the network in a cyclical manner. Okay, but even then, how do we get our heads around the sheer diversity of networks? To address that, we tried to come up with a network typology, classifying networks based on their scale. Are they in a single country, a region, or are they global? Based on their composition, is it homogeneous? Is it all a particular type of actor? Or is it diverse with government stakeholders, private sector stakeholders, CSO stakeholders, and so on, right? So the typology gives us a way of thinking about the different types of network that we're dealing with. And linked to that is this notion of stages of maturity. Networks can be at very different stages, from a nascent, starting to form kind of network where people don't really know each other yet, to something that's really self-sustaining, self-driven, and very mature. So understanding that seemed like a really important piece of the puzzle. And then the next element is around measurement and learning questions. This is really about trying to define, why are we trying to do the evaluation? What are we hoping to learn from asking the questions and deploying the tools? Is it about generating impact for donors, or is it about supporting network members to understand where they themselves are placed and to find that useful for informing their own adaptive decisions? And finally, measurement and learning activities, in which we include a combination of activities that are more related to, say, data collection, might be monitoring, routine tracking of how the network is functioning, how it's performing. It might be evaluation type activities, conducting more systematic assessments at periods in time to understand how a network is doing, but also sense making and learning activities in which network stakeholders are able to reflect on and engage and make sense of the evidence that's being generated to feed into their own decision-making processes, whether that's about how to support the network for a donor in the next phase of growth, or whether it's about network members deciding how they want to take the network forward. These four elements, which sit across these three different levels, were important components. If we can go to the next slide. I'd like to talk a little bit more about network maturity, because any question of evaluation or measurement, or for that matter, impact, is going to be shaped significantly by the maturity of a network. We won't expect, for example, to see the same kinds of impacts from a newly formed network as we might from a network that has been growing over 10 years and has now become a very strong and vibrant, self-sustaining network. So we tried to come up with a framework, a rubrics, essentially, based around four major dimensions: network sponsorship, which is essentially about the governance arrangement and the leadership, the thought leadership, the driving energy that is giving shape and momentum to the network. And you'll see the three diagrams at the top here. First is showing a newly formed network, very dependent on a central sponsor, a kind of hub and spoke model almost. And as you move towards the right, the network matures and relationships start to get formed between different network members, until eventually there at the end, you can see the sponsor, the red circle, has started to move right out of the center. And it's much more about the relationships and dynamics amongst the members of the network themselves, and the sponsor can start to take a backseat. So this one dimension of network sponsorship gives us an insight into the maturity of a network, an almost structural sense. But there are other really critical elements as well, like shared interest and motivation. Are people coming together because they each have their own individual interests and they're hoping they can get something out of the network? Or have people started to forge shared interests and a shared motivation inspired by and inspiring each other? And what about shared experience? At the beginning, when a network forms, people haven't had shared experiences together. They haven't solved problems together. But over time, those things start to get built up, and the network becomes something that everyone sees as a place of shared experience. And finally, shared intent and identity is around the purpose, from getting together and saying we want our network to do this or that and reaching a consensus, to really feeling that the network is not something out there, but we are part of this network. This network is us, and becoming advocates and champions for the network in different spaces. And so we looked at these four different dimensions of networks and tried to come up with a rubrics that would allow us to track how, for each of these four dimensions, a network could be in an immature or nascent stage all the way through to a highly mature stage. And now this is important. This is important not just in terms of understanding the stage of a network. It's a tool that facilitates reflection for network members to understand where they position themselves, to understand how the kinds of activities that their networks might need to move to the next stage. But also, as I mentioned earlier, very importantly, to understand what kind of measurement is needed, what kind of impact one might look for depending on the stage that one's at. And that becomes a powerful tool for communicating to network funders, network donors, about what they can realistically expect based on the stage that a network is at. And so this rubrics became a basis for then thinking about different types of methodological options, different tools, different measurement approaches, and how they might work based on the maturity of a network. If we could go just to the next slide. So I'm not going to present the full list of methodological options that were generated. There's quite a long list, but I want to talk a little bit about the process that we went through with two networks, Spark and Linked. One is an immunization network. One is a health financing, strategic purchasing, actually, for health network. One is Africa-based. The other one is global. And to engage network members in trying to figure out what methodological options are most suitable for them based on where their network is right now and the needs that they have, to then start playing around with these methods, testing them out. And we did that through a process that we call right sizing and stress testing. Right sizing is all about trying to figure out on what scale and with how much effort are we going to try and implement these methods. Whereas stress testing is about how do we subject these methods to different kinds of pressures in order to see whether they will really work. And so the whole process is actually very iterative and participatory and collaborative, and takes network members through a process of selecting methods that they think will work for them based on their needs, and then testing them on scales that are matched with what they're able to do, the resources they have, the time constraints they have, and their needs. You can see on the left, there's a little diagram here showing some of the choices that can be made when right-sizing a method. So in this case, it's about progress markers, which are used. So progress markers derived from outcome mapping, allows you to figure out who are your network stakeholders, what are the roles you'd expect to see them playing if this network is really successful, and turning those into progress markers that allow us to go from the changes we really expect to see to the changes that we hope to see and that we would ultimately love to see. And these can be tested with many stakeholders, with few stakeholders, in many countries or few countries, in challenging contexts or easy contexts. You can see there's a whole range of choices to be made. And by providing this to network members and helping them think through what they can actually test in their context, it becomes an empowering process for the network members themselves to really right-size those tools and then test them. And when it comes to stress testing, there are three sort of major levels, you could say. The first, we call it a probe. This is where you test an initial concept. Let's say it's progress markers, and we want to see whether this is something that will fly. So we can present that concept to network members, see how they react, try and get their feedback on initial ideas about the changes that we want to see in different network members, network actors and stakeholders, and reflect on that. It actually becomes a process of helping network members not just develop a measurement tool, but also build a shared understanding of how they think the change that the network's trying to bring about will actually come about. So that's a probe. A prototype is a working model. So now we've gone from a paper-based tool that we can present in a slide to an actual data collection exercise or an evaluation tool or methodology. And we can start to say, is it working as intended? Is it feasible and viable? How can it be optimized? And what's needed to actually make this measurement option work at scale? And then finally, piloting. And piloting is the last stage where we try to actually test a tool on a large scale and roll it out across multiple countries that a network might be engaging in. And so the whole approach was based on trying to come up with something iterative that would allow each network involved in this process to figure out what tools and methods work for them, play around with them, adapt them to their context, and gradually test them on a larger and larger scale, but adding value through the process by either deepening understanding amongst network members of the network's functioning or by actually generating evidence. If we could go to the next slide, we'll see here the actual use of this process that we went through by the Linked Network, the Linked Immunization Action Network, which is funded by Gavi, which is the Global Vaccine Alliance. And at the time, there was this sort of question about what is Linked's impact and should we really continue funding it? And in fact, this whole process of experimenting with the different methods and testing them led to Linked developing a proof of concept based on country impact case studies, which was one of the methods, one of the suite of methods. And as a result, Gavi decided to renew their investment and in fact expand their investment in the network, because they were able to use these outcome harvesting based country impact case studies to see just what kind of an impact Linked was having. And Linked is now moving ahead and updating their MEL framework for the next 2 years, working closely with Gavi and drawing on this approach, these tools to do that. And in fact, the country case study for Armenia, which was an output of the stress testing process, is also being shared in the Gavi Learning Forum. And you can see some pictures here showing some of the outputs of that process. I'll have to stop here, but I just want to say that the measurement and learning framework has been shared by R4D on their website, and I'm sure you'll all be able to get a link to that to find out more what's in there. Thank you so much.
I just shared it in the chat, Andre.
Okay, super, super. So I think now we are handing over to Vash.
Vash.
Thank you, Andrew. Okay, we'll take it on from here. Well, so what I'm going to share is probably going to be suited to people that came in and they were like, well, we've not started doing anything. We are not thinking about measuring, right? Because I know this could be very complex and many times the simplicity of it is lost. So I'm just going to share with you well, I can call it a project or something that happened. So this happened in Nigeria about 6 years ago. And the goal was that we were not trying to measure anything. Okay. Our goal basically was we were going to the community, partner with an association that is already existing, bring young people together and help them to uncover their gifts. That was it. Okay. So there was no framework, there was nothing complex that we wanted to do. So, what happened through all of that? That's what I want to share. So, what we did was anytime you get to a particular place, or even as a project manager or as an organization, the first thing you constantly think about is what is the problem that you're trying to solve, right? Our goal here was we would not start from all of those needs assessments and all of those, what is the problem? Our goal was we're going to flip it over and actually start with the gifts, not the needs. Yes, the needs were existing, but what is it going to mean if we start the other way around? So we started with the gift of the people. So we brought people together and we were having exercises where we're basically talking about what are the gifts that they had. We were not asking for their needs, okay? Now, from there, we were asking ourselves, we're not going to be checking the defects of your community or the thing that is wrong. We basically want to check the assets that you have. And those assets are in multiple ways. There are tangible assets, there are intangible assets. Some of the questions we're asking is, what was a point in time of your community that you felt at your best? Those are some of the questions we're asking, right? So we were not asking what is pretty poor here and what is not working. Then the next thing we were doing was, we know that every human being has some lack, okay? There is something that all of us are looking for. But what is it that you have? Right. And again, there were so many questions we're asking about the things that you have. And some of those things could be as easy as, well, what are the things that you have in your pantry? And every home, even if you are poor or rich, you most likely have a pantry. It was quite interesting. So everyone actually in their homes had a place where they were storing things that they never used for the last 12 months. I'm sure some of you on the call are like, oh, yes, that's true. So, and we're doing this in the grassroots community. And people have things that they've not used in 6 months, things they've not used in 3 months. And those things were valuable. And we could even put money value to each of them. So we were checking that as well. Then, after we did all of this discovery, we were just writing all of these things down, just having these as kind of a free form class in that sense. After we did all of these discoveries, we started asking people, what are you observing? What is coming to you now? And we saw people saying, well, I never knew I had that. I never knew my home. We had all of that. People were just saying things that I never knew I had all of those things, right? Which was very great. But again, what is the usefulness of discovery and doing nothing about it? And then we asked ourselves, as an individual and as a community, what is it that you want to see happen in your community? What is it that you want to see happen in your family? What is it that as a person you want to see happening to you? So we were using kind of a futuristic tool, helping people to imagine the kind of future that they wanted to have in their community or that they want to have for themselves. And doing this, it was just something we're all doing together, co-creating what the vision can look like for this community. Now, remember, we have not talked about the problems that was existing. We're basically uncovering the gifts and the asset that was in this community. As we were coming up with the vision, we realized that people started saying, hey, we can fix that problem. Remember, we were not asking them about the problem. We were basically uncovering the asset and the gifts that they had. So in coming up with a vision and saying, these are the kind of things we want to see, these are the kind of things we want to make happen, and then now taking the question now to how can we do that? That was the point where people started saying, no, we can do that already. We don't even need any external help. We don't even need to go looking for anything. We just need to visit this family, talk to this other person. Why? Because they already uncovered all of those things in the previous exercises around uncovering the assets and uncovering the gifts. So many people that they did not know, many institutions that was existing in their community that they never knew before, they already uncovered all of these things. So here are we, where normally we would depend on grants, we would depend on external help, we would depend on the government to fix things as citizens. Here, people are actually saying the solution is already here. Now, so what happens based on all of those discoveries and the fact that people now say they can take action? I'm just going to share one. So one of the things we discovered in this community that was existing there is an abandoned building, which is owned by the government. It's kind of a project that was abandoned, and well, people have been asking the government to give them this building that, the community should own it. But the government constantly said, well, we cannot give that to you. Now, based on this work that we were doing, and based on all the things that we uncovered, and we started building little projects, we took those little projects to the government and told them, we discovered this is an asset that is wasting away in this community. What if we can turn this to a makerspace? The government was asking, what is the makerspace again? What exactly is going to be happening there? I said, well, it's going to be like a school without teachers, where young people, older people, no matter your age, your status, you can just come, bring your problem, there's somebody to solve it. Bring your solution, there's somebody that needs the solution as well. And they gave us that building. For the last 6 years, this is a building that has been used right now for free, and which was a difficult thing to get before, just because people found there were assets in their community, including the things that they normally thought it was a waste. But now they were rethinking about those things as assets and gifts and the kind of things that they can do with them. So it's possible that you're currently in a network or you're doing certain things and you're not measuring anything at all. I can promise you, magic is happening already that you might not even know. But the way you constantly have to think about that is all of the things that we are doing, how is it useful to the people? How is it useful to their communities? And you don't need to ask yourself this, ask the people, because they have wisdom. They understand the things that needs to happen. But many times we come with our frameworks, we come with our whole design, and want to tick the boxes, and we lose out the magic that could have actually happened. Now, beyond that, so there was a tool that was shared with us from Ikala Trust in South Africa, which also began to make us see there were a lot of moving pieces that were actually happening, even though we're not really looking into many of those things. And so the first phase of what we're doing in terms of uncovering stuff, we were really looking at the human assets that were there. We were looking at the social assets that were there. We were looking at the natural assets. We were looking at the physical asset. Remember I told you about the building? It was at the physical asset that was not being used that we had to now turn to the makerspace. And there were economic assets as well that were also there. So just at a very basic level, again, I'm speaking more to people that are really thinking, well, is there anything to measure? There's a lot to measure, right? And this can be very simplistic. We're asking basic questions. For your human assets, are you actually aware of and the value of your skills and your abilities? For social assets, we're asking people, all these people that we brought together to the program, were you really speaking to them before? And we had many people saying, I've been living in this community for the last 15 years. I have never spoken to that person. But because we were coming together, just uncovering our assets together, I started speaking to that person. Physical assets. Is there an infrastructure that is just lying waste? But we could actually use that and turn that to beautiful stuff. Is our community clean? Are we creative? Are we creating a kind of a space that young people and older people can go there and actually feel energized? So these are some of the very basic things. Again, this is very complex. We're making this pretty simple, and for you to see that even when we're talking about measuring your network or measuring the kind of things that is happening within the people that are coming together, you could really start at a very small level. And again, I know the pressure is there sometimes. Yeah, there's a funder that needs to write a report. There are stakeholders that want to hear about the annual report of what you've done. But this was a real example that we did where we were not constantly bombarded by a donor that was waiting for a report. Basically, we're doing a community work where we just wanted to have fun and, of course, uncover the kind of asset that was happening in this particular community. Again, there's a whole lot of magic that has happened beyond this. One of the things that has happened is that we wanted to really make sure that this was a growing leadership thing. meaning that the person that started it is not the person that should continue to lead it and all of those kind of things. In the last 6 years, I think leadership has changed like 4 times. People in the community just taking on leadership because they discover their gifts, they discover their asset, and they're just taking on leadership. People have gotten jobs, people have moved to abroad just because many of the things that just happened in those communities began to grow that way. Interestingly, the last thing that I was going to mention is looking at the economic assets. The question would be, doing all of those kind of work, how does that lead to money? How does that lead to any form of growth? Now, people found out that they had skills that they could use in a different way. And from that community, they started getting jobs abroad. Now, the money they were making, they were like, oh my goodness, the program we did was so nice. It did look very technical. What if we put some more money into that program, then we can bring more young people now to also discover their asset, and let's see, maybe possibilities can emerge from there. So I'm going to stop there. We could have more conversations around these, but just to give you a very short context about the fact that it doesn't have to be magical sometimes. It could be pretty simple and basic, but possibilities can also still emerge from measuring. Pass it to you, Amanda. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Fash. And thank you, Andre and Yannick and Katie, for all of those valuable experiences, examples, and a lot of ideas to reflect upon. So we are going to try to now rapidly move into smaller groups, so there's a chance to have more interaction with one another and workshop a bit together. I encourage you to continue sharing resources in the chat. We're collecting all of these. We'll synthesize them and share that list of resources that you're all sharing. So keep them coming. And so you'll have that as a resource at the end of the session. In addition, I encourage you all to start thinking about a particular network evaluation challenge you may be facing. When we go into the small groups now, I'm going to just explain what we'll do next. One moment. So in the small groups, we are going to divide up into 5. So you'll be randomly assigned with one facilitator in the room. So you'll be assigned to a breakout room. We'll have about 20 minutes or so in breakout. I encourage you each in your breakouts to spend a few minutes in play, do something quick to introduce yourself, share biggest challenges you're facing when it comes to looking at impact and learning in your networks. You can include that in the chat as a springboard for conversation. Each facilitator is going to try to identify rapidly at least one participant who could briefly share and voice over a particular network evaluation challenge you're facing today. That you want to get some feedback on from your peers in the room, from the facilitator who's there as a resource person. And we're going to try to use that as an opportunity to provide a little bit of peer support to one another. And as time permits, some open dialogue and Q&A among you. So that's really the task at hand. We will come back together for a few minutes at the end to just do a quick recap and stock taking an expression of gratitude before we all depart. But I'm going to now invite Yannick, if you could work your magic of getting us into 5 different breakout rooms to start our conversations. And we'll be coming back together about 20 minutes, 22 minutes after the hour or so to regroup before we end the session. Thank you, Yannick, for helping to manage the breakouts.
I assume most all of you had actually those enriching conversations. And what we are inviting you to do is now to go to the chat. And remember, initially, we asked you to sketch out your garden, your ecosystem, your network as an ecosystem, and to share in chat what parts of your ecosystem, your garden, would you like to nourish as you move forward? Would you like to grow? Maybe that's linked to something that you actually heard today in the breakouts or before that you would like to take with you. So we give that a good minute or so. Let's do a chatterfall. Let's write, but nobody sends yet. And then in a good minute, we will have a countdown and we will all share at the same time. So what part of your ecosystem, your impact garden, would you like to nurture? And as I said, invitation to not share yet. Just give me a few more seconds so that we can all share at the same time. So inviting you, bring that reflection to an end and that sentence, and we'll count down. And when I say 0, we all send. So 3, 2, 1, 0. And as messages are coming into our chatterfall, giving it another 2 to 3 minutes and inviting you to really now read through and be present with the messages. And you can encourage and support. You can actively also offer support to some of the things that you see. I mean, you can react, of course, with emojis, but you can also literally respond to somebody's message and say like, hey, reach out, or there's this resource. So engage with what the others have shared. And also think, is there somebody that might be able to support you? And also reach out to that person. Can be via private message, can be also in the chat. So setting the timer now for 2.5 minutes to go over chat, respond, interact, connect, and I'll also play some music in the meantime. Seeing many hearts flying in, responsive. And you're sharing LinkedIn as well. So a few more seconds to respond. Bring the sentence to an end if you're writing one. Open all the LinkedIn links quickly. And with this, I'm handing it over back to Fash and Amanda to close our session here today.
Thank you, Yannick, and thank you all so much for this session. And I'm just scrolling through all of the comments, really rich reflections, and I think I'm seeing so many comments about how important it is to nurture and nourish the small plants and the big plants, and that this is truly an ecosystem, and how we assess its impact is challenging, as we've highlighted in today's session. There are many tools that we can draw upon, and I hope that today's session has introduced and exposed you to some of those tools and some new thinking around evaluating networks impact. So I thank you so much for participating, and for the rapid peer assists that we just did. I hope that you all took something away from that experience, and will stay in touch with one another to continue to support each other. This is a challenging area. I see comments and suggestions too that we need more forums and opportunities to exchange on this topic of network monitoring and evaluation. So I think with FITO, we'll definitely take that feedback back and look at how we can continue to support this type of dialogue in the future. So with that, I'd like to just share briefly one slide. Actually, I won't, because I'm going to turn it over to Naka, and we will share, as I promised, after today's session, a collection of all the resources, including those that were highlighted through the 3 examples earlier in our session. So you'll have access to all of that and all of the different tools that were shared through the chat today in one place. So that's a promise we'll follow up on. And I would like to turn it over to Naka now, or Fash, sorry. Fash will close us out unless Naka has any further announcements on behalf of FITO. But once again, thank you all, and thank you so much to the facilitation team.
Thank you so much, Amanda. And just before I hand you over to Fash to close us in a special FITO way, I just want to quickly reiterate that I'm dropping in the chat now our upcoming events. That's the Feminist Funding, and the ways you can join our WhatsApp arcade group to continue the chat, the fun, and also our needs and offers market. I've dropped the links to those chats in the chat prompt, and just click on them and it takes you straight into upcoming events, our festival arcade and our needs and offers market. Over to you, Fash.
Thank you so much, everyone. Remember, we started all of these on muting. So why don't we unmute as well? Yeah. And we do a magic as we close. Yeah. So if you can hold, come on camera, we're going to be dancing out. But before we dance out, because this problem is a relevant problem to all of us. So what if we all put our hands like this, raise your hand up, and make sure your hand is touching the hand of the other person on your screen. Yeah, meaning that we are all in the same room and we're holding ourselves together. No, not spotlight, guys. Gallery. Gallery view. Fantastic. So hold your hand, yeah. Make sure your hand is touching the hands of the other person on the screen, yeah, because that's how we're all connected across the world, okay? And immediately you do that, you're going to hear the music, and we're going to do the music, connecting our hands and jumping off. Is that okay? Ready to go, everyone? Okay, let's do this. There we go. All hands connected. You should make some videos, yeah? Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. It's such a great time having everyone together today.